Okay, so next up we have our second panel session. Hopefully there are some panel members somewhere. I can't see too many. Oh, they're coming in from the back. We've got, this is the session sponsored by Webloyalty, and on the panel we've got Luke Jensen, who's Group Development Director at Sainsbury's, Paul Kendrick, Marketing Director of M Brown, if you want to come up and take a seat, Guy Chiswick, who is the Managing Director of Webloyalty in the UK, and chairing the panel is my friend, Mr. Neil Saunders from Conlumino. Neil.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Helen. Just by way of an introduction, Webloyalty is sponsoring this session, and you'll find on your seats, hopefully, a report that we worked with Webloyalty on. And I think two of the very interesting things that come out of that report are that we are facing two types of change at the moment, and everyone knows retail is very difficult and challenging. One of the changes is obviously to do with the downturn, which has been with us, believe it or not, since 2008. So we're going through an enormous period of change economically, and that's a kind of cyclical thing. Eventually it will go away. But the other thing that we found is that there is an awful lot of structural change in retailing at the moment. It's a very unhappy coincidence that the two things have coincided, because it means there's a very complicated job for retailers to do in terms of restructuring their propositions and looking at all sorts of aspects of operations. But of course, whilst the cyclical part goes away, the structural part doesn't, because a lot of it is to do with fundamental changes in the way in which we shop, the channels we use, how we engage with retailers. All of those things are currently in the air, and retail as a sector is engaging very well with those things, but it's probably to a degree playing catch-up at the moment. And if you have a look in the report, there's some quite interesting statistics in there. For example, one of them predicts that over the next sort of few years out to 2020, we'll probably see about 31% less space on high streets. So that gives you an idea of how far and how fast structural change is really beginning to affect the sector. But as much as things change and things evolve, one thing in retail I think will always very much remain the same, and that is the retail sector will be driven by customers, because that is who drives business and that is who we are all here to serve. And it's in that vein that I think this panel is very interesting, because what we'd like to do today is to explore how retailers are really beginning to engage and look at customers in an age of multiple contact points and multiple channels. And we're very fortunate to have some great insight from some great companies in terms of how they're dealing with and how they see the sector going forwards. So just to start off, the first thing that I'd probably like to have a look at is if we could see really the different approaches to dealing with customers in this multi-channel age, because as a sector, we're all at different stages. Some retailers are obviously pure play, some retailers are still largely physical, some are truly omni-channel, some are getting to omni-channel but aren't quite there yet. So it would be great to sort of have a look at how the different approaches are being developed by different retailers at the stages of development. And just starting with you, Guy, if I may, one of the things that would be great to get your insight on is understanding whether there's a bit of a gap between the approaches to dealing with customers and the customer view from perhaps multi-channel and pure plays and physical retailers. And if there is a gap, do you think that actually that gap is closing and is becoming tighter?
That's a really good question, and first off I must admit I don't work for a retailer, but through Webloyalty we speak to lots of retailers every day, and in past lives I've worked closely with Tesco from time at Dunnhumby, and when I was at university I worked for a premium fashion store in Leeds, so I had hand-on experience of customers. But what we're seeing is, or what I'm seeing is the things we've heard today. So from Ajaz, who we just heard a second ago, the fact that companies now are rebuilding themselves as digital businesses and sort of going back to, or just creating a brand new model. And Laura Wade-Geary's points earlier in terms of M&S, who sort of probably the most established and sort of traditional retailer sort of in the UK. Creating a position to actually address the whole multi-channel side of things and actually changing their business fundamentally in doing so. And again, from John from Argos this morning, and the approach they're taking to move from a very traditional retailing model to, again, creating a digital business and everything coming from that. So yes, there is a gap, but it is getting closer. But the reality is it's harder for the bigger businesses, and the more channels you're in and the bigger you are as a business, the bigger the ship is to turn around. So it takes time. And again, John was saying this morning, they have a 5-year plan at Argos to turn around their business into the digital-facing business they want to get to. As Neil mentioned before, the research that we just compiled with Conlamino points to the fact that customers want to be engaged. They want to be inspired to want things. So the key to any business is, whether you're pure play or multi-channel or just on the high street, is insights, and it's how you get that insight and then what you do with it. And again, there are some examples of businesses, big multi-channel businesses like Tesco, who do it incredibly well with the club card. Again, they're the pioneers of having a fantastic loyalty program where they could gather enormous amounts of data, but then use that to create actionable insights and go back to customers with relevant offers. And so they're a great example of someone who does it phenomenally well on the multi-channel side. But you don't have to invest 1% of your profit for the first sort of 3 years to wait to get a return. There are others who are doing it in sort of cuter ways. Like The Gap is a good example of someone who just gathers information in store. So when you make a purchase in store, they'll get your email address, and then they'll email you with offers. So again, it starts to be a bit more relevant than just blanket offerings. But a good example of, again, spending a small amount of money, but to deliver a very relevant and time-based offer. Another good example is Amazon and eBay. As pointed to earlier on the earlier panel, they're just pure play retailers who just invest in their platform, so they can have incredibly agile platforms, which means that when you go on, they can deliver you very relevant offerings and very personalised offerings, which it's more difficult to do if you're one smaller and not as big and don't have the sorts of money to invest, but also from a multi-channel perspective, because you're trying to track the customer across different points and gather those insights at different stages. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, from a multi-channel perspective, is it's joining up that customer journey. It's one thing to collect data in store, it's another thing to collect it online, but actually to join the two up so you can then track that customer from one to the other is difficult because it costs a lot of money. But again, to summarise, a gap exists. It's definitely getting closer, and it's getting closer because the big guys are investing and putting the sort of investment into creating that change. So I think it will be increasingly narrow, especially when you look at the influence of mobile. And we've heard a lot today in terms of the impact that mobile's having, but I think at the moment you're getting people who are browsing and then buying on mobile, and I think as mobile becomes a sort of an increasingly large payment method, then it will help narrow that gap even more, because as you pointed to in the piece of research we did a couple of years ago, it's mobile creates the glue that helps pull together all of the different channels. So if you can use that to connect it from a browsing and consideration and then a purchase perspective, I think you've closed the gap.
Thank you. And Luke, obviously your company, Sainsbury's, is one that's been around for many years. You defy that
148.
148. You defy that statistic we saw in the previous presentation. But one of the interesting things is, obviously, even before multi-channel came big, you have a Nectar card for customer data, and I'm just wondering how that has helped you perhaps bridge the gap between some of these multiple channels that we now have.
Well, it's more than help. I mean, having a loyalty scheme is the bridge across the different channels, because basically what we've got with Nectar, which is highly effective, is effectively it's an incentive and a very simple mechanism for you to identify yourself wherever you're shopping with us. So 74% of all our business through supermarkets is Nectar identified. So people swipe their Nectar card at the till. And they do that because they're going to collect some points, because they may spend some points, but they also do it because they know that we are then able to give them offers that are relevant to them. That's 74% of our supermarket transactions, and that's close to 20 billion. And it's actually 84% across online and mobile, because of course online and mobile you will have pre-registered, your Nectar card's already there. So actually coming at it from a traditional retailer, we've been able to immediately, as we've created new channels, we've immediately created that capability in the new channels to actually identify you. So we essentially know who you are in the vast majority of cases where you're interacting with us, and Nectar is basically what makes it work for us. And just one other observation, because often people ask the question saying, well, why don't you do like Tesco have Club Card that's just you, why Nectar that's a broader scheme? While we are the major part of Nectar, actually the fact that Nectar also has a bunch of other partners in it means that it has that greater appeal for people to want to use it. More ways of collecting points, more ways of redeeming points, and therefore they use it more regularly. And Nectar today has 18.5 million active card users in the UK, which is bigger than Club Card. So we have that benefit of scale. Once we move all of that together, of course, it means that we can then provide you with offers that are relevant to you, and that can be a physical mailer, it can be an email, it can be now on the app. We've got an app that's been downloaded by 1.6 million people to get offers directly to your phone. So essentially what we're trying to do, and what Nectar allows us to do, is to effectively work in an omni-channel way in terms of how we get our points of contact with you and identifying who you are, and then also deliver then a better shopper experience in terms of offers across multiple channels. So it is, it's not just useful, it is the glue that holds it all together really for us.
And Paul, your approach is different obviously, because you started out with a sort of catalogue heritage, and I assume now that online is a rapidly growing part of your business. So in that process of perhaps evolving away from catalogues to more of an online offer, how did that change things like your CRM systems and the way you approach customer data?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting, because hearing people talk, it's quite interesting. We've known our customers for 142 years. We've been around for a while as well. But it's actually, we've known our customers all the time, because you're a home shopping catalogue retailer. The one thing you do know is your name and address of your customer to send them the stuff to. So in some ways, online is not changing customer analytics for us, because it's just giving us even more data now to play with than we had historically. Where it's changing things for us, which is historically the only way we could ever get product in front of a customer was in a paper catalogue. Now we've got the websites available now, and so we can change them far more frequently and everything there. What that starts to do in terms of marketing activity and the way that we actually then contact our customers starts changing things. Web's about 55% of our sales at the moment, but I still tell you, I've got catalogues that are released on Monday, they'll land tomorrow, and I know exactly that I'll get a sales spike on the internet tomorrow afternoon. So the paper is still one of the key drivers for us of our web business. What's different though is that because we can now get the product to customers, the catalogue is becoming much more of a trigger to get customers to go online than it is the actual product presentation. So that changes the format and the frequency of books. So it's smaller, more frequent offers that are going out. We also mentioned data. Because we've got all this data now available to us, and not only the transactional data that we've always had and the contact data, but also the browsing data that we get on the internet. What we're actually doing is putting those two things together. We run that through contact optimization tools. So I know now that which customers will visiting the website 2-3 times a week, which ones are engaging with emails, and therefore I don't need to send them paper activity. And then I've got the alternative, which is I know which customers get the catalogue, will open it on the Thursday morning and be on the internet that afternoon. So therefore I do send them paper. And I also know those that get paper and never touch the internet. So because we've got the information, we can then target stuff. So it's using the analytics and the data to then target them and get the segmentation right. So that's sort of how it's affecting us.
So it's a lot more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely.
In other words.
Yeah.
That sort of brings us on to the next sort of area, which is very much about how you've got this data, you've gathered it, you know how people are behaving. How do you use it for specific activities? And Luke, you've said it, the sort of Nectar card is almost the bridge that puts everything together. And I just wondered if you could provide some detail around how you would perhaps go about using Nectar data for activities like store openings or marketing, couponing initiatives, those sorts of things that you do day to day?
Well, we pretty much use it for everything, is the simple answer. We heard the phrase a bit earlier on, which is what you can't improve what you can't measure. And that's absolutely true. So we measure customer behaviour, we understand it, and therefore that allows us to do things across the whole of our business. I mean, it's come to an extent, certainly in grocery, that one of the phrases that we've used a lot in our communication to the market, to the press, is the difference between data haves, that are essentially us in Tesco and grocery, and data have-nots, Asda and Morrison. And the difference today in terms of what you can do when you actually have data. We use it in all the areas that you mentioned. We use it for store openings, we use it for product launches, we use it. A few examples. Coupon at till, those of you who shop at Sainsbury's will be familiar with it. When you now, well, since 2009, when you swipe your Nectar card at the till, basically in real time, we analyse your basket of that day, but we also weave in your purchasing history, and we produce through an algorithm up to 3 coupons that are going to be relevant to you for your next shopping. This year we are going to print 400 million coupons. If I look at the statistics, I was just looking before I came at statistics for last week. Last week, the coupon receivers versus non-receivers generated £8 million extra sales. So that's £200 million a year of extra sales just through our Coupon at Till program. And that's just one of our programs for which we use data. Product ranging and launches. We can basically delist a product, put another product instead, try it out, have a bunch of stores where we're going to do that, a bunch of stores where we don't. We then have, because we understand our shoppers, the cohort of a similar cohort of people who were buying the product we've removed in both those groups of stores, and we can then measure whether indeed you buy the new product instead of the old one, or whether you don't buy, or worse still, whether you actually choose, after having realised that product's not there, not to shop with us anymore for that, or whether you increase your sales. So it's become absolutely essential in everything we do, from ranging, store openings. And one of the interesting sidelines of business in this that has developed on the back of data is that we launched earlier this year a business called I2C that's actually a 50-50 JV between us and AMIA who operate the Nectar scheme. And the objective of that business is to commercialise all that data to our FMCG supplier base. So it basically means that we can sell to P&G a programme that is super measurable in terms of their campaign, a coupon campaign, and any form of marketing campaign, or indeed multimedia campaigns, or product launch in our stores. So it basically gives us we have the twofold benefit of both the gain for us and potentially the gain for our suppliers. I'll just add one thing while we're on the subject of how we use data in a pervasive way, which is there's obviously been quite a lot of noise in the last year or so, both from the government, one wonders why they go into these areas, and from the press around how we as retailers use data on our customers. And there's always this sort of fear that they're feeding of a big brother of us doing things that would somehow go against the interests of our customers, or they wouldn't like. It's interesting because we've researched this quite a lot in our customer base, and our customers it's a very grown-up relationship here, and they know, they understand, of course, the simple mechanism of points that you gain and get rewarded on, but actually they also understand perfectly well that by doing so they are agreeing that we will look at how they shop, because that will allow us to give them a better shopping experience. So essentially, we can give them targeted offers. Yeah, there's nothing that pisses people off more than getting an offer for nappies when they're 73 years old. Well, maybe a different kind of nappies, but not the ones that we would most think of. So people enjoy. There's when you look at what do people enjoy in grocery, an offer that's relevant to me is up there on the list of what people are looking for in grocery. So I think the myth that somehow there's something bad and negative for shoppers that we use their data does need debunking, and I think the more opportunities there are, and we push it certainly to the extent that, for example, we've got Sainsbury's Bank, and one of the charters in Sainsbury's Bank is that we will only ever use personal shopping data to inform the sale of a banking product if it's to your benefit. So if we know from your shopping behaviour that you look like somebody very steady who's lived at the same address for the last X number of years, that will allow us to price insurance more cheaply to you. If, on the other hand, we notice that you're buying 12 bottles of whiskey a week, we will not increase your car insurance premium as a result. So and that is just part of what we've committed to, because it is very important that we hold true to the principle that there's a deal here, you're giving me your data, and I'm giving you a better shopping experience. So that's essential to what we do.
Just to pick on one of your things, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because the two grocers that are most advanced in terms of having multi-formats, as in convenience stores and larger stores, are the two grocers that have superior loyalty schemes and customer data. Do you think that's coincidence, or has that really helped you, having that customer data, drive those multiple channels and all those different outlets?
No, I think it isn't coincidence. I think understanding your customers makes a hell of a difference, because the confidence with which you can go and pepper convenience stores close to a main supermarket while understanding precisely under what conditions you'll be just cannibalizing sales versus creating new sales. No, you're absolutely right. It makes a big difference to your ability to do new things. The other thing too that we've found is we find that with every touch point we add to a customer, it strengthens the overall relationship. So when we sell a banking product to a customer, they shop more in our stores. Now, go explain the causality. We haven't managed to figure it out. We've tried to explain it, we just can't quite figure it out. We ultimately put it down to a warmer relationship, a relationship of satisfaction, a relationship of trust with the brand that means that they will spend more. But certainly that ability to measure that can then inform the way in which we can be confident in marketing and new services and new activity, because we know that it's adding to the whole beyond what it's doing in isolation. So yeah, absolutely.
And Paul, your company's had some great results recently, and I think one of the things that you attributed it to is the fact that you have been very successful in recruiting new customers and selling to them. And just in this kind of category of how you use data and how your systems work, I wonder if you can sort of give us a bit of a view of how that process of customer recruitment works in terms of using data.
It's actually interesting, because in the traditional mail order, you used to have almost in the business they had separate teams, one that would look at retention, customer retention, and one would look at customer recruitment. I'll come on to the issues of attribution modelling and all the rest of it, but what we're actually finding now is actually you can't separate these as easily, and because we're now advertising on television, there, well, just because an existing customer sees it, that then is that recruitment activity, or is it retention activity? So for us, what we did is looking at this, and because we realised that actually things that we were calling recruitment was actually driving as much as what we call established sales, it actually started changing some of our marketing investment decisions. So we started last year actually looking at things that we were doing under classic retention type activity, taking some of that cost out, being more efficient on some of our paper contacts in particular, and then investing heavily back into what we would traditionally have called customer recruitment activity. On the back of it, it not only drove established or existing customer sales that improved, but we saw new customer volumes up by 20% in the first half of last year. So, we were fairly pleased with that. Now we're doing that through the typical mail order things of the press adverts and the Sunday supplements and all the rest of it, selling the drawstring trousers in the Sunday Express. We've still got those going, and that pulls in an older customer, inserts and direct mail, but that's now the smaller part of what we do. Most of our customer recruitment activity is, and I use recruitment sort of as a term there, but it's television. So we do a lot now of DRTV, predominantly daytime, but experimenting now even with peak to evening spots, and online, so search, whether that be paid or display or organic search. What we're then doing is, because we can then track the results of those customers, we use attribution models. I will say it is probably developing to become the biggest issue for us at the moment, as it is for most retailers, because if a customer responds to something, was it the TV ad they saw, they then go online and click a Google ad, and what is the thing that actually got them to start the journey. So we're looking at econometric modelling and everything else now, but as to how we work our way through that. But because we're tracking that data, we understand the customer, we know those customers that are new when we first recognise them, and therefore we'll offer incentives, promotions to sign up to accounts or register or transact with us. But what we also have, though, is because the whole business is built up around lifetime value of customers. So we will actually use our lifetime modelling capabilities, look at every customer that comes through, score them, and then on the back of that be able to work out and say, actually, based on what we believe their future profit potential will be, what can we invest in different types of marketing activity up front to recruit certain types of customers, in what techniques, etc. That lifetime modelling then also flows through into what do we do with the customer once we've now got them on the book. So you've placed your first order with us, all very well and good, but what we want is down the second order, third, fourth, and then the loyalty downstream. And so what we look at there is we'll use the data in that lifetime modelling to actually give us a view of that. That will inform our marketing decisions as to how much we're going to invest in those customers going forward. And I say we have a variety of programs set up, in essence, to get the customer through that journey. So yeah, absolutely, it's using data and absolutely just building up on it.
And that's quite interesting, because one of the things it suggests is whether it's about retaining or recruiting customers, or whether it's about looking at customers across multiple channels and different types of stores and outlets. One of the important things is about creating that single view, so you have as perfect a picture as you can present. And I just wondered, Guy, from the dealings that you have with the industry and the people you speak to, are there examples that you would pick out of, these guys, accepted obviously because they've told us their stories, but retailers that do a particularly good job at creating that single view and tying different points of customer data together?
I think it's been referenced already, but Tesco and Sainsbury's with their own loyalty cards are sort of the leaders in the space in terms of how they're able to use the insight and then join it together and deliver targeted, time-based and relevant offers. But again, it's expensive and it's to set up, and it can be done in lots of different ways. And some of the sort of things that stand out for me are, you've got the likes of Holland and Barrett at one side. So again, they're traditional stores primarily, but also have a sort of a growing online business. And again, they're pushing their loyalty card in store, which is again, it's reasonably basic in terms of how they do it, but they push it with everyone who makes a purchase in store. So again, they're capturing everyone who comes into the store, and then they have an opportunity to then target them afterwards through email, through mailings, and again, sort of gather more data and information on them. So every time they make a purchase, I think in terms of sort of creating a single view and sort of following the customer and mirroring what the customer's doing. Again, M&S is interesting in terms of their new home store that they just built in, I think it was in the Northwest last year. And again, they're matching the customer in terms of how they're sort of using the store and what they're doing, and they're arming all their agents with iPads, so they're able to then, again, they come on with the same tools, but they're able to then capture sort of information as they go. The other things, Apple is interesting how, again, they mail you your receipts. So they'll capture your information, every purchase you'll make in store. So if you're not registered with them online, they'll capture you through the ease of sending you the receipts. So it's an easy way to get your details, and then they have you, again, on file and are able to then collect information and use that accordingly. So final two, look fantastic. So they're a sort of cosmetic and beauty retailer, just purely online. And again, they'll capture when you make a purchase, and then they'll have an idea in terms of how long it should take for you to use that moisturiser or use that sort of beauty product, and then they'll mail you within that sort of roundabout time, offering you a discount on your next purchase of that product. So again, people tend to stick to the products that work for them, so there's a good chance that them mailing you that same offer, the offer of the same product is going to be relevant. And again, if they get the timing right and the offer's good enough, then the chances are you're going to make that repeat purchase. And finally, the train line. So again, train line's a good example there of where you'll receive offers of a similar journey you took at a similar time previously. So again, and if you make that journey more often, then it's a greater chance that you're going to be making that journey again. So they're able to alert you to when the time will run out to get the best price for the ticket. But they're also, again, sort of great example of someone who provides all the tools that you might need to then make that purchase, be it if you want to do it on desktop, if you want to do it on your mobile, if you just want to check the train time, or indeed if you want to get your ticket, and then if you haven't got the chance to print it out. So again, using the data they got to understand how people want to buy their tickets, and the sort of the timeframes they have, and then providing the relevant tools to be able to then sort of acquire those tickets. But again, it comes back to it's the relevance piece. So it's the key to having sort of the single view of the customer is then to deliver the relevant offers and do it in a way that people are comfortable with you having that data. So one, it needs to be relevant, but also people can't feel that they're being spammed or receiving something that wouldn't be for them.
And obviously, I think one of the things that's quite interesting is that as time goes on, this all gets more complicated, because it seems at the moment we're just adding channel after channel after channel. We've had the internet, and then we've had social commerce added, and we've got mobile in the mix, and we've still got physical stores. And one of the things that's quite interesting about your businesses, Paul, is that it's almost going in the opposite direction. So I think at the moment you've said you are going to open more stores, obviously from having the catalogue and now the internet heritage. And I just wondered how you are going to integrate those into your already quite strong data model, because that's the difficult part to capture, isn't it?
We just we've opened. We've actually got some stores. I say coming from a catalogue internet background. 18 months ago, we started trialling some stores, mainly because when we look at the market and we still look at it and say, although we are predominantly a plus size and older fashioned retailer. In the plus size market, we've got a very strong share of dress size 20 plus in online and home shopping. 80% of the market though is still bought on the high street, so we're just not in the marketplace. So we felt that we needed to be there. We still believe it is right, even though we're seeing there's good shopping locations and bad ones. We've got 7 stores now that are still very much in trial mode. 7 under the Simply Be banner, 4 have also got a dual fascia with our Giacomo menswear brand in it. And we're looking at them and really starting to say, well, how do we evaluate them, and one thing the other. We've always said right from the outset, which is, in some ways, if the store in itself just washes its face but creates a halo effect into our online business, that would be a really positive result. So when we're looking at the stores, what we're doing is when we evaluate them, is actually looking at both aspects. So we are looking at how the store performing, but also then looking at the catchment area. So we started out already knowing our sales in, say, Liverpool. And we've been able to identify our home shopping sales, and then the store sales overlaid on top of that, and then have the home shopping either catalogue or online grown over and above the benchmark of the other parts of the country, and we are seeing some success there at the moment. What we've also definitely seen is where we put a store, our brand awareness through our brand awareness studies jumps massively. One of the issues we've always had as an online and predominantly catalogue retailer has been that people, our brands are not as well known as somebody that's on every high street of around the country. Where we have got a store, we've opened it within a 30-minute drive time of the store. The awareness figures have jumped by 17 points, and that's within 18 months. So again, it's definitely becoming they're a showroom and they are a great advertising vehicle. It's definitely proving to work. I think one of the challenges we get in stores, which, I say, with a business like ours, we've always known every customer, and actually we've always known, for quite a long time, known every browser in terms of coming to the business. The challenge you get in the store is how do you get the customer to identify themselves so you can recognise them. It's great when you hear Nectar, because obviously they get there and they're using the loyalty cards. We have an account system, and customers are at the till will be encouraged to open or use their account, which is seamless across all the channels. The problem we get in our business, of course, in a fashion retailer, you get a lot of customers walk in and walk out. And it's that browsing activity where online you actually, through cookies and one thing or the other, can start to use that browsing information to build up information. In a store, all you've got is anonymous data. And I think that's the real challenge that we've got. So I think once we get the customer at the till, we can recognise them, we can feed that into all of our CRM systems, we use all that in all the normal targeting, and it just becomes another touch point. It's the browsing bit, and how do you use that when it's anonymous that is probably the challenge for us, given that, I say, we've always known customers.
And that, I suppose, might come on to one of the points that you made, Guy, in your first answer about mobile perhaps acting as this glue that sticks everything else together. And I just wonder, from your perspective, how do you think that mobile piece is going to change CRM and customer data gathering? How's it going to act as that sort of binding force?
Yeah, I think it would be huge. I mean, to recall the numbers that were mentioned earlier, so from the Google presentation, 75% smartphone penetration by 2015, 20 billion pounds worth of sales from eBay Mobile last year, 4-to-1 shift in terms of mobile to desktop browsing by 2015. So, the world is moving that way, and incredibly rapidly. So, as we saw from the latest research we've done, the lines are blurry now in terms of when consumers are shopping. Before it used to be, you'd read your newspaper, you might sort of read a review, you might see an outdoor poster which inspired you to look at something and made you feel good about that product. You might hear a radio ad which again prompted you to do something about it and get down to the local car dealership to do a test drive. Whereas now, again, it's all happening within a smartphone. And I see it when I'm commuting now, where most people in the carriage are on a smartphone or a tablet that's 3 or 4G enabled. So it's the lines are incredibly blurred, and we hear it from the retailers we speak to. So there was a small pure play fashion retailer we spoke to recently who told us that 20% of their sales came from mobile, which again you would expect it to be. But that 80% of that number was between 7 and 9 o'clock in the morning. So again, people are now turning what was traditionally dead time on their journey in to browse. But it's not just a case of they're browsing now and then doing something about it later. They can actually act on it and browse and purchase or review or load up a review themselves. So, the advantage in technology around smartphones and systems and back end will only increase this further and help tie all those different elements together. So it will be huge. And again, it comes back to the relevance piece, but also giving something back. So there's a report in Marketing Week recently which referenced Carling, Unilever and Kellogg's who are giving giving data away, free data to people who would sign up, but in return for doing a customer survey. So again, sort of really neat model. They're giving you something which is probably going to appeal to a younger audience who's looking for that. But in return for just doing a survey, that's pretty good. And then they've got you engaged. Then and they can go back to you with relevant offers, or go back to offer you more things to get more back. So I think it will be massive, because again, it comes back to. It's immediate, it's time-based, and it has the ability to reach consumers at points where you couldn't do it traditionally. And I think it would be interesting how it sort of impacts on a manufacturer perspective, because certainly my time at Dunnhumby, all the CPG manufacturers he spoke to, you would either speak to the trade guys who were just interested in shifting units, and it was all about margin and units, or you'd speak to the brand guys, it was all about awareness and recall. And the reality now is you stick mobile in the middle of it, and you can do both of those things. It's not just about choosing a medium that you might promote or might use to engage, because it's good at awareness. Smartphones, tablets.
I was going to say, you also solve, Paul, your problem in the process, which we're in the process of solving, which is actually a lot of the in the history of retail, it's all about checking out. So you're anonymous until you check out. Yep. And one of the things that we firmly believe mobile is going to make happen is checking in. So we've actually got a trial at the moment in 3 stores of mobile shopping, where essentially you're using your smartphone to do your own scanning as you go. We've got it in 1 supermarket and 2 convenience stores, which is the first in this country. Walmart did something equivalent in the US, but we're the first over here. And there's a check-in process. You just check into a QR code when you get into a store. And why do you do that? Again, you always need an incentive. You do it because it's going to make your shopping easier, or because we're going to be able to deliver you special offers while you're shopping rather than after you're shopping. And indeed, it doesn't take a lot of forward thinking to think of a mechanism where you'll be able to effectively automatically check in just by walking into the store, as opposed to even needing to scan a QR code. So you can, I think checking in is going to be one of the big developments in retail in the coming years, because it'll just allow to enhance the shopping experience. Again, it always has to be quid pro quo, the benefit for the shopper, and something that's useful for you in terms of driving more conversion in the store.
And interestingly, Luke, I mean, you obviously have created a system now with Nectar, and you've evolved it that's quite successful. Do you see there being future challenges? You've mentioned one of them about checking in, and that seems to be something you're looking at. But what are the things looking forward that you think are going to present you with new challenges for making Nectar be relevant still, of course, but also cope with all the sort of new technologies and new iterations that are coming up?
Well, I think Nectar, or any other simple loyalty scheme with a reward system that's valued and recognised, is pretty, that should last the distance. You'll find different ways of delivering your points, of delivering your communication. That a basic mechanism that should last. I mean, I think one of the challenges we face is we are becoming a more complex business. We're doing financial services now. We recently launched ebooks by Sainsbury's, so we're doing a variety of things, and therefore one of the challenges is you want to do all these new things. At the same time, you have to set them up in a way that you are going to create that incentive for the customer when they come into the business to check in, effectively, to show the Nectar card or swipe the Nectar card or enter it when they're logging in, and that's basically what then brings the customers into the equation. Now, I think beyond that, to come back to your point on that view of the single customer, we see it much more that there's just a journey of evolution, and it's not so much about single customers, it's about matching relevant offers to relevant customer groups. So you effectively, if we've got 100 things we're doing this month, I want to be able to cut all the people in this room for whom number 1 is relevant, number 3 is not, and therefore you do get a lot of, it's not so much single as just very tailored through sophisticated multiple segmentations. And so we've gone from a place where we regularly email 3 million people. We, up until recently, had 200 variants in the engine we were using. Basically now, because we're cross-matching so many different offers, as of this month, it'll be close to 1 million different emails for 3 million users. So, but we wouldn't actually need to go to 3 million emails for 3 million users, because they're not actually. It surprised me that we got to 1 million, because it felt like within a few 100,000 you should certainly have it covered, but it worked out at 1 million. So we're getting that capability as we go. But as I said, I think the biggest challenge is ensuring that you have easy mechanisms that don't create a barrier to the customer to basically get their details, and that means you don't want them to have to write things down. If they have to spell things out, I noticed my name, Jensen, is often spelt with an O by people who don't know that Jensen is spelt with an E. So if you do that and you're relying on a name, then you won't be able to find that individual in your database. So you need to make sure that process, for example, we're all done. How many times have you stood at a checkout of a hotel or store where they've said, could you give us your email address? And either you just say, no, I can't be bothered to write it down, or you just deliberately scribble or scrawl something in the hope that you're not going to get the email, because they're asking too much. They're creating a barrier that you don't want to have to jump over. So you need to lower the barrier, ensure data accuracy, and have relevant rewards that are going to effectively give a reason to the individual to actually take part and sign up.
Well, I think on that, again, interesting with mobile and sort of the whole near-field communications piece where you can move away from doing coupon at till and actually have it on your phone. And the issue before used to be people didn't want to hand their phone over to have it scanned, whereas actually if you can just zip that from your phone, the same if you're in a hotel and you can just zip your details in.
Absolutely.
And it's there. So I think, again, it's a good example of mobile stepping everything on another.
Yeah. No, we will not. There is no doubt that a few years down the road we won't be printing paper coupons. I mean, we'll probably continue to do both for as long as there's needs for both. And we've always got, Justin, my boss, always his favoured position on anything technological is he takes the defence of Granny, basically. So he's the one who will ensure that when Granny comes to the till, she will still be served in a traditional way. Now, of course, the surprise is that Granny is often the first to embrace the technology. When I was mentioning the mobile scan and go trial, I was actually just last week down in our store in Tadley where we're trying this out, and an elderly couple, he was holding an iPad to do the mobile scan and go shopping, and she was pushing the trolley. And they absolutely loved it. Why did they love it? Because they could get it in big letters on their iPad. It allowed them to tot up their shopping while they were doing their shopping, and they liked that level of control. They were not exactly your cutting-edge techno couple. So that's one of the other lessons we've learned in all these things, is that we design it. The issue is a lot of the people involved in designing these products are 20-something super techies. There are quite a lot of young people in this room. A lot of people are probably involved in designing some of these products. In grocery, that's not the target you're designing them for. You're designing them for the 40-something-year-old mum or the elderly customer. That's who you're designing for.
Which I think, in terms of time, probably brings us, unfortunately, full circle, because we're just about up. But it is a good point, I think, to end on, because it comes back to that point we made at the very beginning about customer centricity and about actually always bearing in mind who the customer is and what they want, whether it be in terms of what you're putting in your store or whether it be in terms of the applications and the devices that you are creating to gather data. And one of the very interesting things, I think, that this age brings us is it almost does bring us full circle, because if you think back to the kind of 1950s retailing, which your industry and your company would have obviously been involved in, it was a very personal experience. The local shopkeepers in the shops would have known that Mrs. X coming in buys a pound of butter and has X, Y and Z. As we went through the kind of 80s and the 90s, we probably lost some of that. But now there's a sense, I think, with this new era of customer data, perhaps it's not quite so personal. It's not the person standing there that knows the customer, but arguably the companies know a lot more about individual customers, and that, as Luke said, helps them to create a much, much better experience. So it sounds like the future, especially from these guys' point of view, is quite exciting, and I'm sure it's very exciting from retail's point of view as a whole. So if you'd like to show your appreciation and thanks for Paul, Guy and Luke for their insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.